The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation-building series, The Law and You. This is program number 975, coming to you on Monday the 8th of June 2020. On this program, I will speak to you on the topic life interests. But before getting into the topic, a few preliminary comments by way of obituaries. I would like to send out, as usual, my deepest condolences to all families which have suffered recent bereavements. And let me begin by sending condolences to the families of the 3 victims of the explosion and fire in Union Island. The last time I spoke with you, the young lady was still alive in the hospital, but subsequently we learned tragically that she had died. And it is not easy for one community to lose 3 souls at the same time in such tragic circumstances. My heart goes out to all of the relatives and the people of Union Island and the Southern Grenadines in general. And condolences to my sister, Reverend Elsie Davis of the St. Elizabeth Spiritual Baptist Church. She unfortunately has had a string of bereavements recently. She lost a nephew, a sister, another relative, and then on Sunday yesterday, she helped to lay to rest her uncle, Mr. Alfie McCall of Belair. My sister, you know the word, and you know that the good Lord never gives us more than we can bear. So I hope you and the family summon the strength to cope with these multiple bereavements. And yesterday, the St. Elizabeth Cathedral commemorated the 2nd anniversary of the passing of our late patriarch Edmund John, who founded the church, who was such a pillar of strength in the Belmont community and in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as a whole. Even though it's been 2 years, we still miss him. And we celebrate the legacy of his life and times, and we certainly could see tangibly that he devoted his earnings towards erecting an edifice to the glory of God. To Mother John, Sister Latoya, and all the other members of the family, I hope you continue to bear up with the loss. Now, recently, 2 former schoolmates of mine passed. Firstly, Mr. Carnot Barber of Barley. Carnot and I were in the Barley Anglican School as little boys together. We went up in class 3, class 4, class 5, class 6. Carnot was extremely bright. In fact, Carnot used to help me with my sums, arithmetic. Yes. He could spell, he could read, he was a fountain of stories, a boy of great wisdom and promise, but unfortunately, he didn't get the opportunity to move on to secondary school, as so many of my classmates in Barley did not. And you know, all the years that I was studying, I had in mind those many students of my acquaintance in Barley who didn't get the chance to go to grammar school as I did, and who didn't go on to secondary school, but who could have blossomed if they had the opportunity. And I keep remembering the words of the poet Full many a gem of purest ray serene, the dark unfathomed caves of ocean bare. Full many a flower is born to blush unseen, and wastes its sweetness on the desert air. So many of our youngsters in my time. Bright promise, but the opportunity was lacking. To Karnat's family, I wish you all the very best, and remember your father was a soundly educated man who would have climbed to higher heights if he only had the opportunity. To those of you of the young generation who get an opportunity to get a secondary education and beyond, please make the most of it. Make the most of it. The second schoolmate whom I remember with fondness was a schoolmate of mine in the grammar school. In fact, we went into grammar school the same morning. I refer to Mr. Trevor Edwards. He lived in a house belonging to a man called Mr. Verrill, right where the Bank of St. Vincent and Grenadines Rye Gate is built, so that he was the boy who lived nearest to the grammar school, in that he lived at the foot of the grammar school playing field. Trevor and I became very close friends throughout the years. And if it's one thing I remember Trevor for, Trevor was the boy who provided me with my matinee money. Oh yes, I owe my love of cinema to Trevor's generosity. There was no time Trevor got ready to go to matinee and he didn't see me and he didn't give me my 10 cents so that I could buy my ticket to go to Pitt. Those days, Pitt was 10 cents, stall was 15 cents, and house was, I think, 20 cents. And then upstairs you had balcony and box. Trevor, of course, was in the higher social rank, so he always went up to balcony or box. But Trevor made sure I usually get my 10 cents to go and see a movie. Thanks to Trevor, I developed a love for movies. Little did I know that I would have gone on to study in Canada and got the opportunity to rub shoulders with two of the film stars I had seen at the Lyric Cinema in Kingstown. Oh yes, there's an old actor called Lon Chaney. He appeared in a lot of Dracula movies and a lot of gangster movies. Lon Chaney, whom I saw at the Lyric Cinema in Kingstown, thanks to Trevor's generosity. And there was a female actress, Tippi Hendren. She acted with Sean Connery in Manny. She acted in the Hitchcock film The Birds. Saw them on the screen in St. Vincent. Little did I know I would end up on a theater stage in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in August 1967 in a play called Of Mice and Men, written by John Steinbeck, alongside these two great film stars whom I had seen and adored. I had a small role, that of Crooks, and it was put on by the Circle Theatre in Saskatoon. And from that I got the princely sum of, I think, $70, which helped finance my trip to Montreal for Expo 67. Great times. Thank you, Trevor. We know him here as a beautiful voice with the Kingston Chorale, and to the members of the Kingston Chorale, I give my deepest condolences to his brother Clifford and his other siblings. My deepest condolences. We have missed a great man. We remain friends throughout the years, and every time I see him, I would remind him of my matinee days. Thank you, Trevor. All right, now for the topic of the evening, life interests. Excuse me. I have dealt with this topic not too long ago, but from the point of view of the rights of a life tenant. Remember I told you that a life tenant is the name of somebody who has a life interest in property. Tenant there has nothing to do with the paying of rent. Just like the person who gets a property after the death of a life tenant is called a remainder man, even though it might be a woman. Well, if you have a life interest in property, it means you practically own the property for the rest of your lifetime. Life interests generally arise when an owner of property gives the property to somebody, but that gift takes effect on the death of the owner. And I'm always reminding you elderly people, if you're going to give a deed of gift of the home in which you live to one of your children, make sure, and you live in that home, make sure you tell the lawyer or tell the child when he goes to the lawyer to let the lawyer give you your lifetime in the property. That way, nobody can throw you out of there, put you in the poor home and some other institution against your will. And I've known strange things to happen in this place. I've known parents give their properties to children only to have the children bundle them off to the Lewis Burnett home and live in the parents' home. Hardly visit the parents in the Lewis Burnett home, and then the parents die. Well, if you keep your lifetime in a property or life interest in the property, you have the right to live there until you die. Now, the law says that a person who has a life interest in property has a responsibility to take proper care of the property so that when you die, it passes on to the remainder man in relatively good shape. A life tenant is therefore liable to what the law calls waste. W-A-S-T-E. That is a responsibility which the law gives to you or imposes on you. That responsibility says, look, this property is earmarked for somebody else when you die, and you take the best care you can of the property. Don't let it get too run down. You're not expected to build it over if something goes wrong calamitously. But you are expected to care for it as best you can according to the circumstances. Naturally, if you have no resources, if you're not working, you have nobody sending money for you, you're just barely making it, then you could hardly be expected to buy paint for a property in which you live or to fix every leak in the roof. But you are supposed to do the best you can. Also, even though the remainder man doesn't get the property until you, the life tenant, has died, the remainder man has the right to inspect the property every now and then to make sure it is being kept in reasonable condition. If, say, a life tenant is enjoying property, a dwelling house in which he or she lives, and it starts to get run down, galvanizing need changing, doors start to get rotten, toilets stop functioning and this sort of thing. The remainder man can volunteer to fix those things if you are not in a position to fix them. You cannot refuse to allow the remainder man to fix up the place if the remainder man can afford to do so and you cannot. The law is not going to allow you to be in a property that is getting run down, and the person who is waiting for it when you die is in a position to keep it in good shape, to fix up what is wrong with it, and you are refusing and tell him, no, leave it alone. And the property gets increasingly more and more dilapidated. The law says no, the remainder man has an interest, and if push comes to shove, the remainder man can go to court and get an order from the judge to compel you to allow the remainder man to carry out necessary repairs, because it is in the remainder man's interest not to allow the property to deteriorate to such an extent that by the time you die, he or she hardly has anything proper and has to rebuild. Therefore, the remainder man can exercise the right to ask the court to permit him or her to carry out repairs to the property for his benefit, but also for your current benefit, because you are still alive, you are still living in the property, and you will benefit from a property that is kept in good repair. It is not a detriment to you if galvanized are leaking and the remainder man says, look, I can fix them, let me. You can't tell the remainder man, no, let them leak, I ain't care. They're going there just now. No, you can't. The remainder man can go to court and put all that before the judge and give evidence to show that the place is deteriorating, that he has called on you, and that you have no resources to repair the place, and he should be given the opportunity to do so. And the judge, if satisfied that it is for the benefit of the remainder man and for your benefit as well, and it is not going to be any detriment to you, you have nothing to lose, the judge is going to say, let the person who is going to get the property when you die repair the place and fix it and keep it in good condition, so that by the time you die, he doesn't get a mere shell with woodlice having eaten down the doors and all the windows and windowsills and window panes falling out and galvanized rotting off and ceiling falling in and all this sort of thing. Therefore, to say you have a life interest in property means you have responsibilities towards whoever is getting the property when you die, if you have a lawful, legally registered life interest in the property. Even if it is a property which you voluntarily gave to somebody, once you sign a document saying that you give it to them, then the law says you have to carry out these responsibilities. Now, there are certain things I want to clear up. If you have a life interest in property, you can't sell the property. Why? Well, you only have it for your lifetime. So you can't sell what you only have for your lifetime. Secondly, You cannot give away the property to somebody else because it's not yours to give. Now, you can mortgage your life interest if you could find a lending institution that would be willing to take the chance. Because if an institution knows that all you have is your lifetime in a property, and they're willing to go ahead and lend you money on that, then power to you. If the loan is insured, then the institution, well, they're risking very little, because if anything happens to you prematurely and you die before the loan is paid off, that the insurance will pay off the loan if the loan is insured. Now, a life tenant can rent the property in respect of which he or she has a life interest. And if the life tenant rents the property, the rent belongs to him or her, the life tenant, not the remainder man. The remainder man can't come and say, well, look, you only have your lifetime in the property, and I see you're renting out part of it, or you're renting out the whole thing. I want the rent. No, no, no. The rents, what the law calls the rents and profits of the property, belong to the life tenant. When the life tenant dies, well, then those things go to the remainder man, excuse me. Similarly, a person who has a life interest in property would normally have the right to exclusive possession of the property. So if you have a life interest in the property, the remainder man cannot turn around and say, well, look, I send in so-and-so to live there with you, because the property will be mine when you're dead. Well, you have to wait till the person is dead before you could send in anybody. Once a person has a life interest, unless a document has been legally drawn up giving the remainder man power to share possession of the property, the life tenant is entitled to exclusive possession of the property. In other words, the life tenant alone can live there, except that the life tenant is free to bring in whom he chooses to live there with him. Again, a remainder man can say to a life tenant who is willing to bring in somebody to live there with him, can say, well, you can't do that. Why you can't? Of course he can do that. Because in the eyes of the law, he owns the property until he dies. So if, for example, you have siblings you don't get along with, and you have you are a remainder man, and your parents are living in, our father is living in a dwelling house, which he has deeded to you, but has kept his life interest, father could decide to bring in any one of your other siblings to live there, even though you and the other sibling don't get along. Because if the sibling has fallen on hard times, a father being compassionate, because the bonds of parenthood are stronger than the bonds of brotherhood. You know? Two brothers or brother and sister may love one another, but they cannot love one another as much as their parents love their children. And you can't ask a parent to see a child, no matter how old, suffering, not having any dwelling, not having any place to rest their head, and you are living comfortably in a dwelling house in respect of which you have a life interest. you are entitled to say, man, look, come and live with me. But the day your eyes closed, the remainder man can put them out. They have no right to remain there a day longer than the last day you, the life tenant, is alive. And therefore, if a life tenant gives a lodging to somebody, the person can only enjoy the lodging for as long as the life tenant is alive. When the life tenant dies, all rights belong to the remainder man. It doesn't matter what the life tenant would have signed with anybody else, because a life tenant cannot confer on anyone any greater rights than he, the life tenant, has himself. And as I've said before and keep on repeating, the life tenant only has an interest in possession for the rest of his lifetime. You say, well, suppose the life tenant goes to the hospital and is no longer living there. Never mind. He might go to the hospital, he might go into any institution. He ain't dead yet. So as long as the life tenant is still alive, the law protects his interest in a property in respect of which he has the life tenancy. You can't say, well, he go on hospital and nobody know if he can come home, and if so, when he can come home. No, you have to wait. You have to wait on the good Lord and what the Lord decides to do. If the Lord decides to take the life tenant to his bosom, fine. When that time comes, fine. But you can't say the life tenant is supposed to live in the house for his lifetime, and if he is no longer living in the house, he's living well, nobody lives in a hospital, but you know, some people go to the hospital and spend a very long time there. So that I hope I have assisted you in understanding some of these things. Again, as I'm always telling you, if you have a situation where you want advice, do not hesitate to go to a lawyer. That is what lawyers are there for. Much better to seek advice and receive legal advice and be put right than to do your own thing and end up in difficulties, because it is always more expensive to get out of a legal conundrum than it is to seek advice to put yourself on the right path beforehand. Prevention is always better than cure where legal matters are concerned. All right? All right, well, I hope you found the program interesting. So until next Monday, I'm sorry that on the previous program I didn't remember that with Monday was coming up, so I said the last time, I'll see you next Monday. Well, I can really say I'll be of further service to you next week, Divi, because I'm pretty sure next week, Monday, Divi is not a holiday, okay? So until next week, Monday, Divi, here's hoping that we will have a pleasant week, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls. Continue to take precautions against the COVID, and may the good Lord continue to bless us all.
The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.